Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 200th episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com. I am your host, Michael Hartmann, flying solo. One of these days, we'll get Mike and Naomi back on as well. As a reminder, Mopsapalooza is coming up in about a month. So if you haven't got your tickets, get those now. For this special milestone episode, we're joined by someone who brings a real dual perspective, having worked deeply in both demand gen and marketing operations. So joining me today is Monica Wright. Monica is a growth and demand generation leader who has led ops teams, hired them, and depended on them. She is a growth and go-to-market advisor, and she's here to talk about the often overlooked challenge of mutual understanding, why marketers need to know more about how ops works, and why ops teams need to understand how the rest of marketing works to truly drive impact. So, Monica, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah,
I've been floating around the MOPS community for a long time now, and it's a great opportunity. Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. We're glad to have you. So, and this is a topic that our longtime listeners will know that I'm a big advocate for of mutual understanding. So, but let's start with your background. I covered a little bit of it. You've worked across both demand gen and operations. So,
Yeah.
how I'm curious how that has shaped your approach as a marketer.
Oh, sure. Well, actually, if you're open to going a little bit further back,
Let's do it.
I actually come from publishing. I mean, even further back, like back in the days when there were paper routes. I had
Oh
one of
yeah,
those. Yeah, and I
you
was
had a paper route.
I
Okay.
did, and my sisters inherited them too. So,
I
um,
was a backfill for my friends who had them in Minnesota, and I always
yeah,
hated it during the holidays. They would the Sunday delivery on a winter day in Minnesota on a
the worst.
bicycle, not so fun.
Yeah, I've done that. Only, in Massachusetts. But so I get that. I
Yeah,
absolutely get that. Lots of Walkmans broken,
yeah,
lots of batteries, expired. No helmet. But it was, and I was thinking about this earlier today, and I had this aha moment. It's like, wow, I was in the middle of collecting money, talking to customers,
yeah.
delivering the content at 12 years old. Like I was that person, and we would get like requests to like ask our subscribers, questions about, feedback and all that stuff. And at 12 I was like, well, that's kind of like an ops marketing thing, and I didn't even realize that till this morning. So
Right.
anyway, I thought I'd share that little anecdote. But yes, I was first in publishing, um, from B2B publishing to newspaper publishing. And what was really interesting was, it was really about, you could say, oh, yeah, that was all content marketing. Sure, yes, it was, but it was mostly circulation. So we were essentially, building out when newspapers are going online, building out products, to attract audiences, right? So
Yeah.
my background really was in that notion of audience development, and when the early 2000s came about, the notion also of search and content retrieval, exploded as one does. And so I
Yeah.
made the move over to search, had that sweet spot working for Third Door Media for about 10 years or so. And so I got to talk about digital marketing technology to audiences everywhere. And that's really where it started.
Right.
So I had the pleasure once, during COVID, there were some changes, but I had the pleasure once of actually interviewing. I was like, you know what? After working and launching martech.org, being part of that team, like, it's time for me to go into a software environment and really understand how these businesses are marketing, because I was the media person, right? So we were building the audiences for these SaaS companies.
Right.
And so I was like, let's flip that a little bit. I had that opportunity. And, there was this one time I had this interview with this one gal, and she was like, oh, you don't have any direct software experience. I was like, no, but it literally hung up on me, like on the screen, right?
It's
So
crazy.
like I need to get my butt into in-house. And so what what really happened was, like, it was out of necessity. I had to understand how these frameworks work. I already knew who the players were on, from Martech. Um, and, we had to build on our own, especially when the organizations were really scrappy. So that's really how it ended. It's like understanding both sides, really, understanding those functions. Just you can't do one without the other. And especially
Right.
if you're like the one person, you're figuring it out all on your own. Even back in the old, early SEO days and building your own blog. I mean, we all had to figure it out on our own. And where we got traction was sharing that information. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and it was all community led. But
So when we talked before, you said that there's a number of marketers who often underestimate how much they depend on their ops teams or ops person. Sometimes it's just a person. Yeah. What if you were to give advice to marketers? Yeah, I guess general marketers, demand gen marketers. What would you recommend to them in terms of trying to understand what goes on behind the scenes within the ops realm?
yeah, this is something I'm really, it's really important to me because I've seen it play out so many different ways at different organizations, and the notion of operations being downstream or the ones that are reacting to requests, it doesn't, I think marketers, just some marketers, not all of them, but they just don't realize this, how ops is the strategic backbone, like the
Yeah,
nervous system, right? You've got product, which is, the heart and soul, and then you've got the nervous system that really pulls it together. Um, and so it's not just about keeping the lights on, right?
right.
And it's designing those systems for the entire go-to-market motion. And I think, you know, though just that philosophy, rather than realizing that MOPS is our tactical department, they're really a strategic organization, if you will, or a function that is the glue, that accelerates, that drives the accountability in a way, because they're the
Sure.
data folks, or we are the data folks. They're the ones, like, they have the overarching vision of how, the campaigns are working, but also how the full go-to-market motion's working, right? So, and it's also about, I think, keeping the teams sane, So if there's this, I think a good operations team will protect the marketers' energy in a way. They're not
Yeah.
questioning the data. They can focus on what they can do best. They can collaborate a little bit better and really focus on who the customers are, rather than, oh, this form's broken. It's just, I think there's this mutual importance and trust that needs to happen, and it's definitely not downstream.
Yeah. So let's take it from the other side then. So
Yeah,
yeah, what would you tell marketing ops professionals to be doing to better understand how to support their marketing teams,
sure.
and maybe even go beyond that? Right. To me, I think of doing that for both marketing and sales, especially. Well, I think of it in the B2B sense. So,
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
So, I think ops folks, first of all, getting out of the reactive mode, being proactive, right? And so instead of waiting for the campaigns to launch and then scrambling to get the information or to track them or to facilitate them, it needs to be part of that initial conversation. And I also think, having a great ops team can be a translator in a way, right? Between the marketing, the creativity, the messaging, and what the business reality is,
Yeah.
right? And so, it's, I've worked with organizations that really considered marketing as this, like, arts and crafts
Yep.
motion.
Hmm.
It's
The
not.
president, the PowerPoint team, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're the PowerPoint team. We're the ones that are getting stuff printed, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And what this, the operational piece of that, I think, they're the ones that are really understanding what's possible behind the systems. And they're the ones that are building the new infrastructure. They're the ones that, or we are the ones that are bridging between, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could do this versus, oh, this is what we can actually do and make it work by scale, right? Make it
Right.
grow. And I think that element is really important. I also think ops teams really own the data story. They're the ones that are determining or assisting, like determining the metrics to track. They're the ones that, or we are, I should really say we, because, as marketers too, we're the ones that are, telling the teams about what the customers are doing, what the campaigns are like, what the pipeline is, how the pipeline's performing, where are the bottlenecks, what's not working, what is working, and creating that accountability across that whole team. So it's not just about marketing, but it's more on the revenue side and the whole business side of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
I think a lot of marketing ops folks get frustrated because they feel like they're just being told what to do this, really
Indeed.
reactive. And my my response to that is some of this is on you, right? In that you,
Oh,
like, I think
yep.
this is where the understanding is important, right? You need to understand, like, you should really understand how, how the business makes money. That's like
Yes.
number one. But like, if you're partnering with marketing teams, you should understand what it is that they do, what it is that they're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
because then you combine that with what you described, right? Understanding what's possible, and that you can then um, be a trusted advisor, right?
Well, that's it.
That's
The trust piece, you're creating that ops team is creating that confidence, not just in the data, but in the whole the whole go to market operation. They're the ones that are, we again,
yeah,
focus. We can focus on the accountability. We can focus on, you know, um, recommending what actions to take, recommending, okay, we can repeat this process really easily and scale
right,
it, right?
yep,
This is what's really meeting our ICP
yep,
versus just, a plethora of leads coming in, or this is what we should really do in terms of, well, maybe we should focus on retention rather than acquisition. You know, these are the teams that, have the fingers everywhere,
yeah,
and really are the conductors to make it all work.
yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I've got a like, I remember this is actually before I think marketing ops was even a term, but I had a role which was when I think today it would have been probably in marketing ops or close to it. But I had a product marketing team I was working with at a big company, and they're like, we want to put a form on our website to let people give us feedback, or
yeah,
give us ideas. And
yeah,
I was like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, yes, we should do that. I was like, well, okay, let me just walk you through what's going to happen, right? Building a form and getting on the page and capturing that, easy. Actually, it's really
right.
easy. I said,
But then what?
what you're doing is you're setting up an expectation for these people that you're going to do something based on that.
Yeah,
What are you going to do?
right. Then what?
And there
Yep.
was silence, right? And I
Yeah,
said, that's the, like, to me, that was a way of pushing back. And it's like, I don't have a problem with doing that as long as you have a plan for what you're going to do that's going to be
right,
realistic.
right.
Because if we do that, I actually thought the risk was higher of disappointing it or angering customers and prospects if we did that, because we weren't going to do
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
In which case, we're asking them to give up a lot without getting anything in return.
Right, right. And I think, and, based on your previous question about, oh, why marketers should really understand. I mean, this day and age, it's a lot more prolific. I mean, it's assumed, but even 5 years ago, it wasn't assumed. Like, well, we need to find out all the things, and we're going to have this form with a gazillion different data points, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. Okay, well, what are you going to do with it? And that should really be a joint conversation. That shouldn't be up to ops or the marketer. I mean, I think that's the full, and sales. I mean, it's not and product. It's not just
I'm
a
so glad
tool,
you said that, right? I mean, because
you
it's like
know.
I think a lot of teams, it's a lot of times the sales process part of it gets left out.
Yeah, and that's really where, this holistic vision or view, and where ops lives in that holistic view. I mean, it is all equal parts, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It is all equal parts, and it's
yeah,
not a downstream function, especially now with just the prolific software options and AI and the expectations of buyers and the expectations of customers and users and everything. I mean, it is the nervous system, 100%.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I think if you get to that point and you understand how all these things work, where they work well, where they don't work well, and
Yeah.
if you understand the marketing and sales process and how these
That's right.
what's driving
Yeah.
behavior, right? There's a little bit of the psychology part of it.
Yeah.
You can be in a position to be the kind of person who goes doesn't just say yes, we can go do that. I mean, sometimes
That's right.
you absolutely should. And sometimes you shouldn't. But like to me, like there's always in many cases for like big new ideas, like there's trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
Marketing guy comes like, I'm so excited, I've got this great idea, right?
Yeah.
And they describe it and you go like, I love that idea.
But
Here's how we can get close, right? I
yeah.
think that's a different conversation than saying, no, we can't do that. Done.
Yeah.
Full stop,
Yeah.
right?
And that's really where that coalition or that team mentality really needs to happen. I mean, and unfortunately, I mean, it's still a lot of places, it's just still downstream, it's still extremely reactive, but that that and it's not just the technical piece. I think it's really about, okay, who are we trying to reach? Who's the
Yep.
ICP? It's like, oh, well, sales is going to sell to these easy wins, but they don't really meet this broader campaign. But oh, we got to go hurry up and go do that because we need to reach whatever quota or whatever goals that we have in place,
Yeah.
and it doesn't meet the other thing. And so everybody gets all completely distracted because sales is saying, well, I need to reach my goals. Marketing's like, well, we've got these campaigns in the can. And then you've got ops saying, well, what am I supposed to do? Right.
Right.
And um, that's why it just needs to be jointly owned, and
Yeah.
without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Well, it's funny. I was just talking to somebody today, a marketer. We were talking about how marketers have never actually gone through the customer experience of what happens when they say fill out a form, right? What is that going to like? What is the customer's experience going to be like?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Hey, that's wild for me, especially as someone, we've had to build. I mean, I've done, migrations. I've done all that. I've seen bad data. I've seen bad email deliverability. I've seen
Yeah.
spammy instances. I've seen all kinds of things. And that should not, there should be like, there should be like a test.
Yeah. There should
I
be.
really think so. It's like, okay, if you feel like, just a casual conversation, if you're joining, a podcast, me, for example, now what am I going to do with it? Oh yeah, sure. I'll take the transcript and I'll do all this cool stuff. Okay. Then what? Right.
Right.
Then what? Oh, I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. Okay. Then what?
Yeah.
Right. What are you going to do with it? Right. And
Right.
how are you going to take advantage of that? And some of that is like operational. A lot of that is operational.
Yeah.
And and it just makes a world of difference to have that foundation. And
Absolutely.
like I said, I've been part of like bigger technical migrations and building from scratch. I've been in instances where there are no campaigns in place yet they want results. I mean, like, it's just it's it's enough to want to stick a fork in your eye, but being able to articulate, especially from the operational side, how that is just so crucial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So, okay, switching gears a little
Sure.
bit, especially given your kind of what you're doing now with advisory kind of stuff.
Sure.
One of the things you said to me when we talked was that assumptions about growth can be risky without a clear picture of like what the data process technology tools are and what the implications are there. So, but can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. Absolutely. And I've seen this play out over and over again, and it's such a big trap, right? And so when a company or part is when when you're scaling, and there's always this constant pressure to show results very quickly, and then someone comes to you with a shiny new simple thing, shiny new, yeah, simple, right? Process change, or you hear about, I've got this idea and it's going to solve all our problems. There's this temptation um, to want to believe that that growth trajectory is going to be extremely straightforward and in one direction.
Yeah.
And when we make those assumptions without that solid foundation of understanding the discovery piece, if you don't audit, your data, if you don't document what you've got for workflows, and I'm putting on my ops hat for a second. If you don't map out how that stack is actually connecting, not just on the go to markets, like also with the product teams, any sales tech, you could really just cause a lot of chaos,
Yeah.
um and there's I've been in situations where there's belief where you could just layer on more campaigns and more and more and more, and if you double that, you're going to double your output, and you're not,
Yeah.
it doesn't
No.
work that way. And it's those assumptions that sometimes can create like a domino effect too. So, as especially, if your foundation is bad, the data will get messier if you're building just more and more on top of that. The reporting gets, there, you lose the trust.
Yeah.
People start pointing fingers at each other. Leadership doesn't believe you. And then that easy, shiny new thing, that fix is, it becomes that drag that everybody else is trying to accomplish this when everybody's just trying to fix stuff, right? And so getting sucked into that ad hoc, siloed, mode of being reactive, just it just, what it does, it fixes yesterday's problem, but it doesn't serve what you're supposed to do in 6 months from now, or the opportunity that might present itself later. And I think that payoff is really critical, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's just, there's a pill to swallow right now in order to make it better later. And that foundation work is not exciting, it is not exciting.
Yeah.
But it's better than having a broken team and bad feelings and a lot of churn for the
Yeah.
customer. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think there's this paradox that people don't realize is there, and you hinted at it, which is the easiest example is say you have a team and you double the size, right? You think, well, we can double the output.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
reality is there's inefficiencies that
Oh
happen
yeah.
when you get more people involved.
That's right.
And the same can be true if you've got, I don't want to even say siloed, right? It could still be teams that try to work together, but where you have different people doing different things across part of a process, say
Sure.
developing a piece of content, right? That requires there's some teams that are doing
Right.
copywriting, there's creative, you're putting it
Yeah.
together, you're getting it posted to a website. Like one of the things I often see is that, hey, we want to pump up how much content we're going to publish, and especially now with AI, I suspect that's really an expectation.
Yeah.
What I find is the thing that causes problems is like the underlying lack of trust between these teams,
Right.
which then leads to layers of review and approval that tends
Right.
to then put things in this loop of not. So this idea that you could do more, is like it's not like yes, you could do more, and you probably get some incremental improvements by putting pressure on the same team or even adding a
Yeah.
person or something like that. But if you don't fix the underlying trust issue, expectations of
Right.
review and approval, that somebody like it's never gonna go to the multiple that you think it is because,
Right.
well, first off, it never will because it's just not realistic. But
No.
second, like if you don't solve that, and I see that cause problems with teams
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lack of clarity from a leadership point of view too, right? I mean, I think some of that's clarity, not just from the team point of view, like leadership needs to own that trust. I think, I mean, it's not
Yeah.
just my job to just, I mean, sure, I should trust my ops team, I should trust the creative team, project management, whoever, of course, right? But if leadership is up here and sales is saying something else, or if, engineers something, I have no control over that, right?
Right.
And so you could be the best marketer, best collaborator, best team member, most knowledgeable of everything, but if there's no trust, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. And that trust takes time. And I think that's where like there's that disconnect. Trust has to beat speed. It always does, because it takes a long time to build that trust, and it only takes a little bit to just break it in half.
Yeah.
And
But you have to have that trust to be able to get as much as you can out of that
yeah,
increase, right?
yeah, yeah,
But the flip side of that is also important, which is like you may have the initial trust, but there needs to be um, you could pick the right word, right? Forgiveness, grace, whatever that
yeah.
is on
And
the other side of
advocacy,
it.
and
Yeah,
advocacy.
because yeah, because there
Yeah,
mistakes will be made,
of
right? Like
course, of
full
course.
stop. And it's a matter of um, not treating those as like. So if you go to this one kind of to some degree, right, extreme where you trust people to do the right thing, and a mistake is made, and you just say, "Oh, well, damn it, we need to go to the other extreme," right?
Yeah,
You're not really solving the problem long term. You're just going to
right.
cause more problems,
Right.
different kinds of problems.
Right, right. And I've been in this situation, I'm sure you have too, where, from a marketing point of view, I was actually just talking to a gal who's a chief digital marketing officer, a new role for her, and she was talking to me about, oh, how the sales team are making like marketing recommendations on their search marketing programs. It's like, what? Nobody should be doing that. They should trust you, you're doing whatever you're doing, right? They should just trust that. Nobody should be doing that. And I've been there. It's like, I can do my job. Let's go over here and really look at it from a full picture, So rather than just saying, oh, it's marketing fault, this sale, no, it's not qualified, or well, you're not closing, that's like
Yeah,
it
it
doesn't.
spirals. That's a
Yeah,
negative
yeah,
death spiral,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that is a spiral that we do not like,
My
for
dogs
sure.
don't like it. They're adding theirs to this.
Oh, good. See,
Yeah.
yeah, we love dogs. If
Um,
I could just have dogs on my team with dog
right.
lovers, I'd be
Yeah.
psyched.
Okay. So you've kind of touched on this as a bit as well too, right? There's a lot of teams that are doing highly manual processes or powering through things to get things done. They're being, I would say, heroic, right? This is more on the
Yeah.
upside. So, um, how would you, if you were coming into an organization, you started seeing this, like, what would your advice be to them? And maybe, say you got in one, like, what would be the signs you see that an organization is headed into that direction where they're relying too much on brute force?
Yeah, brute force, how many times have we seen that happen? It's like, we just need to get through this, we just
See,
need to do
I
this now.
like brute force. This is why I played rugby
It
instead of
depends.
played something that required.
It depends. Yes, but um, when, okay, here it is. Like, you can actually see some of these gaps like right away. Just, so you could call them red flags or whatever. If you're always in brute force mode, you're going to spend, it's not efficient, right? Everybody's going to be spending more time wrestling with the systems, or and when I say wrestling with the system, it's like, oh, I just don't know how to use HubSpot. No, it's like you're building stuff in spreadsheets. You don't know if that's new or old. You don't know if campaigns are being managed. Like, if you've got everything in spreadsheet, how can you tell if you're in trouble or not? How can you tell what the customer journey is like? How can you, and I'm not saying this is the case, for an organization that's really, really small and they're just trying to solve a problem and scale up to be more of a product market fit. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, sometimes you just need brute force just to get the money in the door.
Sure.
But when you're not sure, or where you can't see, when you can't see patterns, right? And even if you have hired the most brilliant folks in the world, you're going to lose momentum. And time is of the essence. And if you can't fix what you don't understand, that's the problem, right? And skipping that piece, for example, switching platforms because somebody doesn't like the notion of lead object versus contact object or whatever, it you're going to lose time. You're going to lose time. You're going to also lose that trust that we just spoke about, right?
Sure.
And you've got you're not going to be able to connect the data to the results or the output that you really want. You're going to have all this manual information, which is probably not even secure in the first place. Then you've got, and you're not building any resilience for future growth.
Yeah.
And so instead of like serving your customer, really trying to grow that piece, which is what we're all about, you're juggling a gazillion different spreadsheets and answering questions like how do I get this report, and that's not true, and I can't react, my workflow and this lead came in but I didn't get it, and because it went to
It's
some email that
broken.
hit
Right.
spam. That just can't, you can't function that way, especially now. I mean, the
Yeah.
buying journey, our buyers, I'm a buyer, you're a buyer in different ways. We want our answers now. We're
Right.
not waiting till some guy or some gal gets kind of our information and then does the research and puts my name in a spreadsheet and asks permission or whatever,
Yeah.
And no.
I mean, the problem with brute force stuff, and I was only joking that I like I'm a fan of it, is
Well, no,
like
there's places for brute force. I mean,
sure, no, I am with you, right?
try it all
There's
the time. I'm changing
like
changing fields,
yeah.
like,
No, I mean,
but
when you're making that decision consciously, but I think what you're describing is when the default mode is brute force. Because the pressure to deliver more doesn't go away. What
yeah,
ends up happening, brute force tends to also go with manual, which
yeah.
also means now you're putting a lot of people in your yeah. It leads to more mistakes, is my
Well, a
experience.
lot more for
Yeah,
sure,
because
for
it's just
sure.
it's highly manual. You've got people who are trying to do too
Yeah.
much too fast, and it just leads to more mistakes. So I'm wondering though, then does that mean that there are reasonable times to take a pause if you recognize that this is starting to affect your team? And I think this is mostly for leaders out there. When you
Yeah.
recognize your team is going through like their brute force, lots of manual stuff, and I'm not saying everything should be automated because I do not believe that. But
I
when you're
agree.
seeing that affecting your team and the quality of the work and the timeliness of the work and meeting commitments, does it make sense to go like, let's pause, right? Kind of
Yes.
slow down,
Yes.
try to get
Focus.
things in order, and
It's all
then
about
we
focus.
can speed up after that, right? Once we like,
Yeah, it's all
and then
about
just
focus.
get
Yeah.
yeah. Have you gone through anything like that before?
I have. I have. When I was at StreamSets, which is now part of IBM, there was this product called Transformer Snowflake. I mean, it's a data integration product, right? And they're doing some. You could transform your data within Snowflake, and it was like all of a sudden 6 weeks. 6 weeks. It wasn't just because Snowflake Summit was happening, so there's that event-led stuff. But then we have to turn off all the campaigns. We have to build this out. We have to find the ICP. We got to find all the stuff, and all the state, and we were brute forcing it. There was no, we were brute forcing to
Yeah.
the nth degree because we had this event coming up. We were relying on our partner motions. We were relying on also on product, right? And we had this nice great big idea of also like, oh, let's do a free trial with these guys too, right? So then we had to pull like the product data and part of the automation.
Right.
But you know what? Because of that brute force, we actually had to turn it off because the experience was hokey. But the and this was a couple of years ago now. So, but what we did learn, we learned something from that. What we learned was you know what, if we did that with that focus, we were just focusing on that campaign focus. Um, can you hear my dog snoring? Forgive me. With that focus, what we
That's just
learned.
part of the charm of
Yeah,
our
yeah,
podcast is that real
yeah,
life
yeah, yeah.
happens
Thank
behind the
you.
scenes.
um, you know, the it was like contract, accounts were closing like 4 times faster because of that focus. And that's really,
Yeah,
there's some other metrics around that, but that's, where brute force can happen if you're doing it out of not just necessity, but then you have to say, okay, stop. How can we iterate from that? What did we learn from that we can automate? What can we do as part of our campaign structure,
yeah,
future planning, that sort of thing.
yeah. I mean, I think brute forcing something for a time limited kind
And
of
that's yours. Yeah.
thing, right? And
Yeah.
and one that you go into it going like, we don't anticipate that we're going to repeat this on any
Yeah.
kind of regular basis. I
Right.
think that's when it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, and I'm all for that. I'm all for that as opposed to going out and buying some new tool, right? Which
Me
is a
too.
pretty big change, right? That's the
Yeah.
um, so that leads me to another question. And so, in like you, I think you've mostly been in at least in a marketing role, like high growth, constrained resources environments. So one of the challenges with those probably is prioritization
Yeah.
and making sure that you're effectively communicating across functions. Like, so what are some lessons you've learned from that? And then my second one, and this, because I think there's people like me who have less of that experience in more large organizations. How well do you think some of those lessons would scale to those larger organizations?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, okay, we can't do everything, and I think that the idea of growth at all costs is outdated at this point, right? There's to a point,
Right.
right? Um, so this hits home because, that scrappy high growth environment where you have to know how, what, who, where, when, all that, and what resources you have. You can learn a lot of those extremely hard truths really, really fast,
Sure.
and so this is, where prioritization, of course, we just talked about that, but the biggest learning recent is even more recent than anything is like, because we can't boil the ocean, map out, an example. Here's an example of like data. Um, you got web metrics, you've got campaign metrics, ad spend, all these things. Rather than saying, okay, this is how many website visits we've had and how many conversions we had, like, okay, instead of that, tell me the percentage of our ICP that did that. Tell
Mm,
me, that's what I want. Just focus on that ICP, focus on who you're trying to reach. And so that language of just ICP or target accounts or becomes the focus instead of
sure.
saying, oh, look at our traffic, tripled last month. And it's like, well, yeah, because we were all at, this event. How many of those? I don't care. I want to know what the ICP is doing. So that's one way to focus that is really, I think, critical and everybody can get on board with, right? Sales would love it.
Sure.
Leadership would love it. Execs would love it. So rather than talking about all those vanity metrics about, oh, hey, look at all the people on LinkedIn, they're like, yeah, sure, but how many of those are target accounts, right? Also, that cross-functional collaboration, right? So, we talked about silos a little bit, but, you know, embedding those other functions like within the process. So if you're going to have a customer success motion, like, if they're sharing feedback, have that part of that function, right? So it's not just okay, marketing's doing this and ops is doing this and sales is doing this or whatever. It's essentially forcing that regular engagement within the
Right.
team, and making everyone understand how their role connects with the final output, which is revenue, and I
Right.
think those are the two big things. So we talked a little bit about the data, but also just the team. It's like, okay, here where we're focusing. So if you're going to talk to me about random acts of marketing, because this webinar would be awesome.
Random acts of marketing. I love it.
Yeah, my former VP of marketing used to say that. It's like, nope, we're not doing that. It's a random act of marketing, not on plan. It's not meeting our ICP. It's a nice to have. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
And it's not like it being draconian about it. It's about focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so just for ops folks out there, like my rule of thumb in terms of prioritization, like if there's a problem with lead flow, that's generally where I give that highest priority, right?
Of
Even if
course.
that means bumping a longer term strategic project.
Sure. Same.
Because I don't want to be the one, particularly if it's hand raisers, right? People who
Right. Yeah. That's always mission critical. And also, if your campaign, if you have an email problem, mission critical. Yeah.
Right.
I know.
Oh, like a deliverability, reputation,
Yeah.
that kind of, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's becoming, from my recent experience, it feels like that's becoming more common to have issues with that, with all the changes with like what Google's doing and Microsoft's doing and everybody else, all the major email providers.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to this collaboration piece, because I think one of the things that breaks down is terminology, communication.
Oh, yeah.
How do you it feels like there needs to be a part of that is this is kind of getting back in the mutual understanding piece, right? How do you make sure that when you're saying things, the other person's nodding their head, that they actually have the same thing in their head, or at least close to what you were meaning, and vice versa?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, this is so underestimated. Like I don't even so underestimated, even like naming conventions for folders, right? Even campaign naming conventions. That notion, that glossary, it's like one of the first things I've always done, manually. It's like, and while you're talking, you're onboarding with teams and what have you. It's like, okay, and your qualified lead is, and how do you know it scores? Like that vocabulary, and it's everybody needs to speak the same language. So when they see a campaign naming, they know which campaign that is, who the target is, and all that stuff. They should be able to see that. They should know that. That's part of the efficiency. Nobody needs a gazillion, death by Slack cuts, no more. Here's the documentation. We all agreed on it too. That's the other piece, right? It's like that agreed. And that's part of like that SLA agreement, like that internal agreement. It's like, okay, this is how we're defining a lead. A qualified lead is this type of account, this type of, firmometric, technographic, what have you. And then it's like, okay, here are the customers we want to grow. This is why they fit these criteria. I mean, it should be front and center for the entire team, not just, the marketers and sales, but, ops kind of owns that in a way, not even just owns it, but is the gatekeeper of that. And I'm a firm believer of that.
I even go like up a level.
Sure.
I don't mean up a level in an organization. I mean up a level in terms of the thought process. Is that as you were talking about, you used the words campaign, you used the word lead, and I think their assumptions. There's the whole trope: assumptions.
Oh yeah.
I think they actually cause problems, right? Because people assume you said campaign. And I go, oh, well, you mean a campaign record in Salesforce or in
right.
But what you meant was there's this broader campaign that includes we're going to do digital media, we're going to do stuff on our website, we're going to send email, like all these things, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, like, those are very different things, and I see that very often where like we got this campaign, or what's going on with this campaign, or leads is another one, right? There's a lead record in Salesforce. Is it a qualified lead? Is it somebody who's a returning prospect? Like, all these terms, require clarity, because it leads to misunderstandings.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes. Right? And it makes reporting really hard. It makes telling your story really hard.
Yes.
It makes everything extremely difficult. And so I used the word draconian earlier. I am completely draconian about this stuff. You know, I because there I don't want any surprises. You know, if we talk about marketing qualified accounts, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? It could mean
Yeah.
anything, you
So
know.
that
And
so that if you pull a report out of Salesforce and your
you know,
sales
marketing
counterpart
qualified
pulls it,
accounts.
you get the same numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you know, and if there are questions, you know, it's documented somewhere.
Right.
You know, there's a wiki, there's a document, whatever. This is what a marketing qualified account is. Here's a link to what that list is. Here are the, you know, and um and that communication, I mean, it's just that can really save not just time, but a lot of frustration
Absolutely.
and bad feelings, you know.
Yeah.
So we don't want that. We don't want that. It's not just like, you know, tough fun. I mean, I think it's organizationally imperative, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, the product team should understand what a product qualified account is,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
We don't know, you
Like,
know.
I actually don't even care what the terms are they use as long as there's a shared understanding of what they
Shared
are. Now,
understanding.
I
Yes.
have strong opinions about what some of those should be defined as, but
Sure.
I'm not
Yeah.
I'm willing to be flexible
Yeah.
within reason.
Yeah. And, you know, instead of every meeting also becoming this debate of the translation of what this term means versus what that
Yeah.
metric means, whatever, you're not talking about that anymore. We've already just, you know, it's defined, done.
Right.
Let's talk about, you know, how are we going to tighten the sales cycle? How are we going to position ourselves? Why are we
Right.
not renewing? You know,
Yeah.
those are more important for growth
Yeah.
than trying to make a magic definition of something that somebody
Right.
thinks is important, you know.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's wrap up here.
Sure.
So I feel like we have to end every episode with something about AI, or at least have it
Oh,
as part of it, right? So
yeah.
how do you see AI fitting into all this dynamic? You know, especially
Yeah.
for marketers and ops pros. What are you seeing out there? Would you tell them to watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, it is a force multiplier for not just for ops teams, but for everybody. And you know, I've seen it handle some pretty awesome stuff. Um, I, you know, okay, I think where we need to be careful in a couple areas is obviously privacy.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that's a given, but also the data quality. You know, is it as good, you know, if we are feeding data into something and we have that layer like HubSpot has, and you can just type in whatever it is that you want to find out. Is that accurate? You know, is there some sort of, you know, ghost in the machine that's just whipping up something random that thinks that based on your history is returning something that you want to hear? You know, and there's also that, and you touched on this earlier, this temptation of automating everything,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And getting so caught up on the tech and so caught up on that automation piece that we're losing sight of what the customer journey is like, what that human element is like. You know, what it comes down to is really, you know, everybody's in business to build relationships and, you know, and make some, you know, that's how a lot of businesses are built. Just fair enough. But, you
Yeah.
know, where you're going to lose that relationship piece or that humanity piece, and some of that nuance is also going to be lost, like some of your expertise, you know, your experiences, how you you know, that strategic thinking, please. Sure, you know, how are you connecting the dots in
Right.
addition to the AI? Sure, it's a lot of potential, but I think that seduction of AI solving everything is is a bit hairy. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot to like. It's just evolving every day. There's
Yeah,
like
it
there's
is.
something
And
new.
there's so much potential. You know, when I was first
Yeah.
playing play, I was like, holy cow, what is happening here? This is all
Right.
this stuff of, well, because it normalized the playing field, right? In a way, like of go to market entirely, you know, it's not just ops folks, it's also marketers, it's also, and so opportunities like that are really, really cool. They really,
Yeah.
really are. But
Yeah.
you also got to think about automating everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've enjoyed the conversation, Monica.
Well,
Really appreciate
thanks.
it.
You too, Michael.
If our listeners, followers want to follow your work or get in touch, what's the best way they can do that?
I just find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. That's the most active place. That's where we all hang out. So Monica Wright, it's just all one word. That's my little URL. So
Got it.
fine.
Perfect. All
Okay.
right. Well,
Yeah.
as always, well, and also thank you for being a part of our 200th episode. I mean, that's like,
Oh yes, I know. Yay! I should have worn like 200 like
well,
glasses.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe I should have, since I've been a part of most of them.
AI can do
Okay.
that for you.
Well, again, thank you so much, Monica.
Of course.
It's been great. It's been a fun conversation.
You too. Thank
Thanks
you.
to our listeners and supporters. As always, would love your feedback. If you have any of that, please let us know. And if you have ideas for topics or guests or want to be a guest, you can always reach out to Naomi, Mike, or me, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Till next time, bye everybody.